Hello, I'm Matt, and I think I'm a psychic medium. I've always been interested in the paranormal and the spooky, and although I've been open to it, I've also tried to err on the skeptical side. After all, I didn't think I had had any experiences, and I certainly never thought it would have any impact on my life. But that was then. Now I want to explore where this gift will take me. In my podcast, I'll be exploring the challenges of discovering a spiritual gift, the long path of development, and how this new page of my life is affecting relationships with friends, family, and myself. So I invite you to join me as I explore my psychic and spiritual journey, as my inner skeptic and inner medium go head to head in The Psychic Explorer. Hello, I'm Matt, and welcome to my podcast, The Psychic Explorer. Thank you so much for coming back to me for my third episode. I'll be absolutely honest with you, last night I spent about 3 hours recording this, and I spent all day thinking about it, and I just had this gut feeling that it's just not right. It just was not right. I came downstairs and my other half said to me, "How did that go?" And I said, I feel really flat. There was something that just did not sing about it. So I thought, right, let's just start again. Let's not spend a whole 3 hours recording about 20 minutes of audio. Instead, let's just try and get it out in as few takes as possible. At the end of the day, it's less editing for me and hopefully more fluid for you guys. Last week, I spoke about how me and my sister went to the spiritual awareness course and how that developed into Circle, and how that allowed me to begin to develop my abilities. It allowed me to question myself in a safe space. It also allowed me to get, and I'm so sorry, I listened to last episode a few times, and I am amazed at the amount of times that I said the word validation. Rather than red car, yellow car, I should have renamed it validation. So if you picked up on that, I'm really sorry. I'm new at this. I'm learning as I go. So just bear with me, please. But at the course, I was able to get that confirmation. There you go, a new word. That confirmation from the sitters I was reading for, that there was something going on. Things were being confirmed within Circle and outside of Circle as well. And I was starting to believe more in myself. But there was always that niggle, there was always that question in the back of my mind saying, is this real or am I just making all this up? And in this episode, I want to talk about my very first reading that I did outside of Circle. It was for a family member, and I'll talk about all the pitfalls that comes with that. But it was a really good experience. So I had been attending this course, which had eventually turned into a regular Circle every Tuesday evening for 2 hours. People from the original course, some of those stayed, some went, they stepped back. Some new people joined us in the Circle. And these 2 hours on a Tuesday evening became really important to me. It became a space where I could experiment. It became a space where I could get things wrong. But I still found myself in this constant battle between what I was saying, the confirmation of what the sitter was saying, and what my skeptical brain was saying. And that still happens today. I'm still never 100% sure that this is not just me making all this up. And if I'm honest, I don't think that should change, because I think the moment that you become that sure of yourself is the moment that you become the medium who stands up in front of everyone and tells you that your grandmother is speaking Spanish to you. And I don't want to be that. I never want to be that cocky. I never want to be that arrogant, that egotistical. So I always hold that grain of skepticism there to hold my ego in check and to remain humble. And with that being said, by this time we had been introduced to a number of different factors and a number of different ideas. Things like oracle and tarot cards, which I still use. I really like them, actually. They are good inspiration for when you are about to go into a reading of some sort. Then there was psychometry, where you read the object. There was also reading of photographs, and psychometry in the photographs. I don't know. It works for me. It does work, but I do find that I tend to read the photo and I read the object quite literally. I look at when was the photo taken. Did the person in the photo look well groomed? Are they male? Are they female? Are they smiling? Are they looking unhappy? Is the object that you're holding expensive? Is it a watch for a guy? Is it a watch for a woman? Those sort of things that you can see give your mind clues as to where to go down, avenues to go down to. And although I had come out with absolutely random things, I remember reading one person's photo and it was of their mother, and I had got that much. And I'd seen this woman walking down this really well kept street, and the feeling of pride that this woman was able to live on such a street was so strong to me. I was able to hear the sound of her heels on the pavement. I knew that she was pushing a pram. I could see the telephone box on the end of the road. And I also knew that with this pride of where she lived, there was also an awareness that although the family had a garage, they couldn't afford a car and she still had to use the bus to get to places. And all of this was right. So there's no way I could get all that from a photo unless there was some other energy tapping into me. But I knew from the photo that this woman was probably around in the 1940s and 1950s. I knew from her dress the type of social class she would have come from. Again, those clues, they started to build stories and pictures, and I like to try and go in absolutely blind so that when I come out with things, I know that they are 100% genuine and that there's no way I could know these things. So this was November last year, so Bonfire Night, and for those outside of the UK, that's the 5th of November, where traditionally there are fireworks and bonfires all over the place. And it's a really lovely way to celebrate the beginning of autumn. Everyone goes out with their sparklers and they go to watch a bonfire, and there's normally lots and lots of firework displays everywhere. So it's quite noisy, but it's a real celebration and I love it because by then the weather is cold and crisp, and there's nothing quite like warming yourself by a massive fire in the middle of a field. It's brilliant. It's a great tradition. So my other half's cousin was coming to visit us. She was coming with her daughters, and for the purpose of this podcast, I'll call her Sarah. I knew that she'd be open to this sort of thing, although I knew that her dad and my other half's mutual family would not be on board with it. So I was quite nervous. So I told her, and it was awkward at first, but straight away she told me that she believed me. And almost as quick as she told me that she believed me, she told me that she wanted me to read her. Suddenly I became really nervous because I was still skeptical of it. I was really aware that I was getting things right in the circle, but what if I really was making it up? The people at Circle were wanting it to be true. It was biased. They were going there because they believed in this, and I was still 60-40, maybe 65-35. There was still that grain of doubt in my mind. I'm very aware that when I went to Circle on a Tuesday evening, I was in an echo chamber where if things were wrong, we were encouraged to look past that and focus on what we got right. The danger with a circle is that if the individuals who go want it enough, there's possibility that they will make it fit. I did want it, but not at the expense of my dignity. And I certainly didn't want my worst nightmare to come true, the idea that people thought I was joining a cult blindly. So all these worries and nerves came rushing to the forefront. And plus she was family. I'd known Sarah for, by this stage, 17 years. I knew all the family members, even though many of them had passed in before I had met my other half. I still had done a lot of research into the family tree. I had visited places in the country where they'd lived. I had interviewed family members about their personalities, what they liked, what they didn't like. So I was really aware that actually, if I were to bring through the mutual grandparents for my other half and Sarah, then who's to say that wasn't coming from my brain? But I wanted to test myself. I wanted to see what else came through, because there were still family members who I was not aware of. I was not aware of Sarah's mum's side of the family. I was not aware of the fathers of Sarah's daughter's family. I knew that they came from a Mediterranean country. I knew that the girls were bilingual. That stuff I knew, but I didn't know anything about the family, about the dynamics. So I thought, what a way to test myself. So I took myself upstairs and I meditated for 10 minutes. Nothing too deep. I can even remember thinking, I can't meditate. I know they're downstairs. I'm too nervous. I'm too worried. What if I fall flat on my face? But I shut my eyes and I just kept myself quiet for 10 minutes before I came back down. And when I came back down, I sat at the dining room table. Sarah and her daughter were there, and my other half was milling around in the kitchen. And we began. And I closed my eyes, because back then I could only do a reading if I had my eyes shut so tight that I almost gave myself a headache. And it was nothing psychic, it was nothing spooky, it was purely that I had my eyes shut so tight that I would give myself tension headaches. And I was sat there in the dining room with them watching me, and I know that my other half said to me afterwards, oh, that was really weird to see you do that. Not weird as in cool weird, as in that just looks odd. Like to see you sat at the dining room table talking about things with your eyes shut, it was just very bizarre for him to see, and I totally get, like, it was totally out of character. He had never seen me do that before. It was not something that he was ever used to, or ever thought that he would become used to. I sat there and I waited for someone to come, and it wasn't long before I felt the impression of a grandmother. And I was able to describe the personality, I was able to describe the relationship between Sarah and her grandmother. I was able to talk about all this, but again, this was stuff that I knew already. It was things that Sarah was confirming for me, but I was very well aware that I knew all this. So was this my brain? Was this something else? It felt like it was something else, but I was aware of all this stuff already. And then I started to describe physical things. Things like her slippers. And it sounds really random and really odd, but I was able to describe the type of slippers, the colour of the slippers. And as soon as I described those, Sarah was saying to me, oh wow, yes, I remember them. That is accurate, yes. And that was interesting. But again, my mind was saying to myself, well, you're describing slippers, which most grandparents would have had in the late 80s, early 90s. That's not a stretch to think that that's just your imagination filling in the blanks. But then I was placed in a kitchen. Suddenly I was in a kitchen in this property, which I had never been to. Because again, this grandparent had died way before I was ever on the scene. And the house had been demolished decades ago. Like I wouldn't even know what sort of house it was. And suddenly I was in this kitchen and I knew it was decorated in the style of the 1970s. And there was yellow vinyl everywhere. All the surfaces, all the kitchen cabinets was all covered in like a yellowy, greeny vinyl material. And she said, oh my God, Matt, that was the colour of the kitchen. It was this vinyl-y, yellowy, green colour. And I think even my other half was like, that's weird. You wouldn't know that. But by that stage, I was in my head. This grandmother was coming through and she was saying stuff that was all pretty generic. You know, that she was proud of what Sarah was doing, where she was in life and where she was going. It was all very lovey-dovey, all very nice. Sarah was convinced, but I was in the same situation. I was not so sure. Sarah had taken something from her grandmother's house soon after she had died, and she'd asked me what that item was, and she said that she was willing her grandmother to bring it through to me, but for the life of me I could not. I was saying all these random objects, and even afterwards I would message her and say, oh, was it this? Was it that? Was it this watch? Was it a brooch? And it'll be no, no, no. And to this day, I have no idea what it is. And I thought that was really interesting because it seems that the answers to specific questions, when I try and get those answers, I'm wrong on them. But the feelings that I was getting around random stuff tended to be right. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why the information that I get through is so random. There doesn't seem to be any control that I can put out there to the information that comes in. And I've heard other psychic mediums say this as well, that when they ask a specific question, they might get a general sense, but it's very rare that they can get a specific answer. And I do want that. I do want to develop that. I want to try and be that specific psychic to prove that I'm not a charlatan, to prove that I'm not a fraud. And I'm hoping that will come with practice. The more readings you do, the more accurate you become. So, time and more readings, hopefully that will improve. Hey guys, it's Matt here. I really hope you're enjoying this episode so far. If you are, you could really help me out by rating it, either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform it is that you are listening to this on. Or if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook or Threads. I'd love for you to say hi. You can find me at the.psychic.explorer. Right, that's all the admin done for now. So let's get back to Sarah's reading. Enjoy, guys. Sarah asked me to do another reading for her to see if there was anything else there. So I sat back in the chair and I closed my eyes again. And straight away, I could feel a grandfather presence. Now, this wasn't grandfatherly to Sarah. This was grandfatherly to her daughter, who was also in the room. And I asked if it was okay to proceed with this. And Sarah and her daughter said, yep, fine. I want to know what comes through. I want to know what he has to say. The connection this time was way stronger. So much stronger. It was just coming through. Whereas her grandmother was on dial-up, this presence that I felt was broadband speed. It was like coming through fast and it was coming through really strong. There was a kitchen and I could see where everything in that kitchen was placed. I could see the clock on the wall. I could see the dining room table and I was surprised at how much smaller it would have been, because if you'd have asked me normally in the daytime, I would have thought this kitchen table would have been huge. But in my mind's eye, this kitchen table was tiny. It was really small, but there were loads of people and there was noise and there was chatter. And this woman was milling around in the background and she was fussing around all the children and making sure that everyone was fed. There was this big pot on the stove and it was boiling away with this sauce or this thing that was being cooked. And I was able to describe all the different elements of this kitchen. And because I had my eyes closed, I couldn't see Sarah or her daughter, but all I heard was, yeah, carry on. Yes, that's right. Keep going, which gave me the encouragement that, okay, I was on the right track. This broadband download that I was getting was correct. So I continued and I felt that this grandfather was winking at Sarah as Sarah had her daughter on her lap and was bouncing her up and down on her knee. And this grandfather was winking at Sarah in a way that was accepting and saying, well done, I'm really proud that you are here and that you are fitting in. Even if you don't speak the language fluently yet, you are making efforts, you are putting yourself out there, you are trying to fit in with us, and that effort is really appreciated. And I was describing this. And again, I was getting back, yes, that's right. Yes, that's spot on. Absolutely. Yes. I knew what this grandfather had died of, but I didn't know the details. Although I couldn't feel it physically, I could feel how the blockage felt. I could feel how the illness was making him feel. Then I was shown a cut glass shot glass with a brown liquid in it. And I knew that this grandfather liked the tipple. I knew that he enjoyed drinking this liquid before each meal. And I said to Sarah, I said, is that right? And all I got back was a, mm-hmm. But I wasn't sure if it was a, yep, you're absolutely right, mm-hmm. Or if it was a, you're kind of close, but not quite there, mm-hmm. So I carried on, and straight away I was transported from the kitchen to the living room. And I was very aware that I was sat in this high-back chair in the corner of the room. Next to me was this open fireplace, and in front of me were the children who were running around in circles. They were either running around or they were on those tricycle bike things that the kids have, and they were just going around and around and around. And I knew that at any minute I would jump up and stop the kids from getting too close to the fireplace. And I said to Sarah, I said, does that sound familiar? And she gave off this noise, and I wasn't too sure if it was a noise that said, yes, you're spot on, or if it was a noise that said, not quite there, as in like, that sort of like questioning, but also confirming noise. So I just went with it. Now, I had not noticed that I had crossed my legs and that my foot was now tapping, but because there was this silence, I realised that my foot was tapping, and I knew that there should have been a slipper balancing on the end of my toes. And I said this, I said, oh, I'm tapping my feet, and I should be playing with a slipper or something at the end of my toes. And there was just silence. And I opened my eyes, and both Sarah and her daughter had a tear rolling down their cheeks. And I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, please. Oh, this is awful. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean this to be so bad for you. And they both said, no, Matt, it's not. It's really nice. It's really nice that we know that he's here. We know that he's looking after us. We know that all the things that you said prove that he is here, because you wouldn't know any of that. And they confirmed everything that I said about the kitchen, everything about the relationship. They said that he did enjoy a tipple and that it was bad for him, but he kept drinking it anyway. The way that he died, the passing. And then I described the living room, and I described the rooms in detail that could not be argued that I would have just guessed, because everything that I said, they said was right. And I think the clincher for Sarah was that my foot was tapping, and she said to me, Matt, his foot tapped and he used to play with his slippers by balancing them off the end of his toes. And that's not something I would know. There's no way in hell I would ever know that. Sarah and her daughter could not understand how I got such accurate information through, considering I was not able to get an accurate idea of the object that Sarah had taken from her grandmother's house soon after she had died. Yet I was able to bring through the kitchen. I was able to bring through the way that he played with his slippers. I was able to bring through the living room, the fireplace, and the way that the children used to play too close to that fireplace. I got all that right. And Sarah's daughter looked at me and said, how did you do that? How do you do it? Like, face in like complete and utter awe, as if it was magic. And I said, honestly, sweetheart, I have no idea. It's just these images just come to my mind. And I think about this a lot. You know, I sit with this and I think, how does it work? And I'm reminded of something I've said my whole life, that you'd be silly if you believe 100%, and you'd be equally as silly to say, no, it definitely doesn't exist. And that's to do with anything, because no one knows everything. We just don't know what happens when we go fully. No one can tell you in full, rich technicolor what happens unless they've been there. And very few people have been there and come back to tell the tale. So I don't know how it works, but all I can describe it as is like psychic charades. I get these impressions, I get these feelings, I get these images in my head, and sometimes I hear things as well, not physically hear, but I know the sound of someone's laugh. I can hear blips of a word, and it all builds into some sort of message. It's down to me to interpret how those elements come together, and that's why I describe it as psychic charades. Or is it charades? I don't know, depending on where you're from. But it's this psychic jigsaw puzzle that we have to put together in our minds. And that confirmation that your sitter gives you, yes, no, helps you to know if you're in the right direction. Because sometimes when you're saying something that's a no, you rephrase it in a way which doesn't make it fit, but because you've rephrased it and you've reinterpreted that image or that feeling that you've had, suddenly it makes sense to that person. And it's the same image that's being presented to you, or the same word that's coming to you, or this feeling that's being impressed upon you. You describe it in a slightly different way, and suddenly it fits. Suddenly it makes sense to the sitter. And because these impressions are so subtle, at first it was really hard for me to admit that these things were what I was feeling and they weren't just my mind. I knew there was a different vibration to these impressions and these images that I was being shown. But because they are so subtle, at the beginning at least they were so subtle, I really had to try and get out of my own mind. And that's something I'm still, battle with. And I think anyone who does this battles with it. But it's getting better. It's getting there, bit by bit. The more readings I do, the stronger it comes through to me. The bandwidth of the broadband is getting wider and wider. And I'm wondering when it might go to fibre. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it does. But going back to that reading for Sarah and her daughter, I was sat there and they were amazed by it. There was, Sarah was convinced by it. She was like, "Yes, you've definitely got this. Everything you said about her daughter's grandfather was spot on." She said most of the things you said about my grandmother were spot on too. But of course, because you know me and because you know of the grandmother, it's difficult to separate what you know and what you were getting through. But she said, because you were able to bring through my daughter's grandfather so perfectly, then there's definitely something going on there. Simon was feeling very awkward because, again, I looked strange. I looked so bizarre. He said, I was just sat there in our dining room with my eyes scrunched up tight and my hands were going all over the place and I was saying this random stuff. So it just looked a bit strange. His partner of 17 years, who's never shown any ability in this area, is now claiming that he can do it and demonstrating it, and it looks really strange. And I get it, it looks very bizarre. The elements that I did get wrong, or the elements that I was unsure of, I found myself focusing on these. I couldn't as amazed as I was that I got a lot of it right, I'm really annoyed at myself, and I guess I shouldn't be, but I am annoyed at myself that I didn't take the time to appreciate how amazing it was that I got what I got right, because I focused on what I didn't get right or what I couldn't get. I started to really focus on what did Sarah take from her grandmother's house. I remember that a week or two afterwards, I would be sat in the living room and I'd just be drawing. After a meditation, I'd be drawing these objects and I'd be sending them through to her on WhatsApp, and she'd be saying to me, no, that's not. And I just thought, okay, now I'm in my head and I'm guessing. And that took the joy out of it. That took the joy out of the amazement, out of the confirmation that actually what I was feeling was right. But I am my own worst enemy. And again, going back to what I said earlier on, it's about keeping my ego in check. I do not want to be one of these people who says, oh, I can do this, I can do that, and then fall flat on my face, or set my expectations so high that I'm never actually able to meet them. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver than over-promise and under-deliver. And that's always been my motto with everything in life. Under-promise, over-deliver, much more effective than the other way around. And I guess part of that is because I don't want to be perceived as a con artist. I had enough doubts going around in my head to think that I was in cloud cuckoo land. So that was my first reading outside of Circle. I was really pleased with it. Again, I got caught up in what I didn't get right, and I got caught up in the things that I was not accurate on. But that's a lesson learned. I like to think that when I bring things through now and they're right, I get very excited and I focus on that. But actually, if I'm honest with myself, that's not quite true. I do strive for that accuracy. But that's because I set my bar so high. And I guess partly that's because I don't want to be perceived as a con artist. I don't want to be perceived as someone who says that he can do this, but actually can't. I learned a lot from it. Looking back on it, it's something I should be much prouder of than I think I have been. And as I sit here, I want to reach back 12 months and grab that mat and say, bloody well done. You know, you gave that a go. You tried. You did that and you succeeded more than you thought you did. There's no way in hell that you could have known the things that you were talking about that grandfather. There's just none. I never met him. I never knew him. I heard very little about him apart from his death. I have no idea. And that is a wonder. That's amazing. And actually, as I sit here, I'm really very proud that I was able to do that, because that's, yeah, you know what, I am. I'm really proud that I was able to face that nervousness and to face my doubts and to do it. And it got a good result. And there's a lesson for you. Just go ahead and do it. Next time, I'm going to be revisiting my childhood, and I'm going to be talking about the things that I experienced, which growing up I've always just swept under the carpet, but now I look back and think, that was strange. Also some things in my adulthood as well, not as much, nowhere near as much, but there were things which, again, I look back now and think, I recognize that vibration. Thank you so much, whoever you are listening to my ramblings into the darkness. I really appreciate the fact that you listen to me. So get in touch. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your experiences are. As I talk to you, letting you know that you're not alone, let me know that I'm not alone. I'm hoping I'm not. I'm hoping it's other people out there who can relate to what I'm talking about and relate to what I'm saying. Thank you so much, guys, again. So I will be releasing the next one in about 2 weeks. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Take care, guys. Bye.